Before we begin, find your coziest spot. Fluff your pillow, pull a soft blanket close, and make sure you're somewhere safe and quiet, where you can let your mind drift like a leaf on a still pond. Set that phone aside. Screens have no place in the foggy kingdom of Dormira. Take a slow, deep breath, feeling the air slip into your chest like a gentle mist curling through a meadow. Hold it for a moment. Then exhale softly, as if you're blowing out a candle across the room. Your shoulders are easing, your heart slowing. Good. That's just right. Let's keep it calm and gentle. Fairy tales, you might think, are bursting with excitement. Dragons roar, witches cast spells, and princes charge through enchanted forests to save the day. Take Cinderella, a glittering ball, a magical transformation. Or Snow White, a poisoned apple, a daring escape. But look closer, and you'll find quieter moments tucked between the thrills. Cinderella sweeps floors for hours, waiting for something to happen, folding blankets and scrubbing pots. These mundane tasks, so easily overlooked, are the heartbeat of the story, grounding the magic in something familiar, something real. And in the forgotten tale of the princess and the pea, it's these quiet moments that shine, revealing a deeper kind of magic one found in the ordinary. Welcome to Dormira, a small kingdom nestled in a foggy valley where the grass is always a little damp and the mornings are soft and gray. Dormira isn't the kind of place where knights slay dragons or fairies grant wishes. It's a place of creaky chairs, warm tea, and endless stacks of blankets, where life moves at the pace of a sleepy afternoon. At the heart of Dormira is a castle more of a cozy manor, really with stone walls that hum with quiet contentment and windows that fog up by noon. Here lives Princess Clara, a young woman who's nothing like the fairy tale princesses you might expect. Clara doesn't dream of grand adventures or sparkling crowns. She's happiest fluffing pillows, testing mattresses for comfort, and sipping chamomile tea by a flickering candle. The kingdom expects a proper princess, someone who dances at balls or charms foreign princes, but Clara finds joy in the small things. The feel of a freshly folded sheet, the scent of ink on a letter, the sound of rain tapping the roof. Her days are filled with routines so simple they might seem boring, but to Clara they're a kind of magic, a way to make sense of a world that demands more than she wants to give. This morning, like every morning, Clara was in the castle's bedding chamber, a cozy room filled with mattresses, blankets, and pillows stacked to the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of lavender, thanks to the sachet she tucked between the linens. A single candle, number 12, if anyone was counting, burned on a small table, casting a soft glow over the room. Clara was testing a mattress, not for a hidden pea, as the old tale might suggest, but for comfort. She pressed her hand against the surface, feeling for lumps or sags. "Too firm," she murmured, making a note in her small notebook, which she kept in her apron pocket. She moved to the next mattress, a thick one stuffed with wool, and sat on it gently, bouncing just enough to test the springs. "Better," she said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Clara had a system. Press, sit, bounce, note. She'd tested 6 mattresses already this morning, each one slightly different but none quite perfect. The kingdom thought her mattress testing was odd, a quirk of a princess who should be hosting banquets or sewing tapestries. But Clara didn't care. A good mattress, she believed, was the foundation of a good day, and she was determined to find one that felt just right. She fluffed a pillow, smoothing its edges with care, and added it to a stack by the window. The fog outside was thick, blurring the glass into a soft, gray canvas. Clara liked the fog. It made the world feel smaller, cozier, like a blanket draped over the kingdom. She wrote in her notebook, "Pillow fluffed, mattress 7, slightly soft." She wasn't sure why she kept such detailed notes, but they gave her a sense of order, a way to anchor her quiet days. Downstairs, in the castle's small kitchen, a maid named Elsie was brewing tea. Elsie was older than Clara, with a no-nonsense air and a fondness for chamomile. She stirred the teapot, watching the steam curl upward like a sleepy dream. "Tea's almost ready," she called, though Clara was too far away to hear. Elsie didn't mind. She liked the routine of tea-making, the way it filled the kitchen with warmth and purpose. She set out 2 cups, one for herself, one for Clara, along with a small plate of plain biscuits. No raisins, because Elsie thought raisins were too unpredictable. In the garden, a sleepy gardener named Amos was checking the rose bushes, though they didn't need much attention. The fog had left a fine mist on the petals, making them glisten faintly. Amos clipped a single thorn, placing it in a small basket for compost. "You're fine," he told the roses, as if they might argue. He wasn't one for grand gestures, but he liked the quiet of the garden, the way it asked nothing of him but a steady hand. Clara, still in the bedding chamber, folded a sheet, smoothing it with the precision of a painter. Folding sheets was her meditation, a task so familiar it felt like breathing. Each crease was a small victory, a moment of control in a kingdom that sometimes expected too much. She didn't know it, but her quiet routines testing mattresses, fluffing pillows, folding sheets were more than just chores. They were her way of proving she was enough, just as she was, no crown or prince required. The castle hummed along, wrapped in fog and routine. Clara's mattresses waited patiently, Elsie's tea slowly, and Amos's roses stood quietly. Nothing remarkable happened, and that was the beauty of Dormira, a place where a folded sheet or a perfect mattress was enough to make the morning feel whole. The morning was deepening in Dormira, the fog outside still thick, but softened by a faint grayish light that seeped through the castle's windows. The air was cool, carrying the scent of lavender from Clara's bedding chamber, the warm floral notes of chamomile tea from the kitchen, and the earthy dampness of the garden. The castle, a cozy manor with creaky floors and soft linens, hummed with quiet contentment, its residents moving through their routines like dancers in a slow, familiar waltz. Princess Clara was still in the bedding chamber, surrounded by stacks of mattresses and pillows that seemed to multiply in the candlelight. Number 12, burning steadily. She tested 7 mattresses so far, each one a little closer to perfect, but not quite there. Now she was folding blankets, a task she found as soothing as a lullaby. She smoothed the woolen blanket, its edges slightly frayed from years of use, and folded it into a neat square. Her movements were deliberate, each fold a small act of care, like tucking in a child. "Nice and tidy," she murmured, placing the blanket on a shelf. Folding blankets was more than a chore for Clara, it was a ritual, a way to ground herself in a kingdom that sometimes whispered she should be more. More like the princesses in stories who slayed dragons or broke curses. But Clara didn't want dragons or curses. She wanted the feel of wool under her fingers, the soft creak of the floorboards, the fog that made the world feel small and safe. She wrote in her notebook, blanket folded, wool slightly frayed. The note wasn't necessary, but it felt right, like a tiny record of her morning's quiet victories. Downstairs, in the kitchen, Elsie was perfecting her chamomile tea. The pot was steaming, its contents a golden swirl that filled the small room with warmth. Elsie stood at the counter, her apron dusted with flour from the kind she used for biscuits. Though today's batch was already cooling, she stirred the tea with a wooden spoon, her movements slow and steady, like the ticking of a grandfather clock. "Almost there," she said to the teapot, as if it might agree. Elsie believed tea was only as good as the time it took to brew. Too short, and it was weak. Too long, and it turned bitter. Like life, she often thought. She set out the clay cups, one for Clara, one for herself on a tray that had a small chip on one corner, which she found oddly comforting. The chip on chipped was a reminder that nothing needed to be perfect, not even in a castle. She placed it beside each cup, plain and round, no raisins to complicate things. Elsie liked simplicity, the way a plain biscuit let the tea shine. She poured the tea, watching it fill the cups with a soft glug, and inhaled the floral scent. It was the kind of smell that made you want to close your eyes and breathe deeply, which Elsie did, just for a moment. In the garden, Amos was still tending the rose bushes, though they were as fine as ever. The fog had left a fine mist on the leaves, making them glisten like tiny mirrors. He clipped another thorn, adding it to his compost basket, which now held 2 thorns and a stray petal. "You don't need much," he told the roses, his voice low and gravelly. Amos wasn't one for chatter, but he liked talking to the garden. It listened better than people, he thought, and never asked for more than a bit of water and care. Back in the bedding chamber, Clara had moved on to fluffing pillows. She picked up a feather pillow, giving it a gentle shake until it puffed up just right. Fluffing pillows was her favorite task, a small act that felt like magic, not the kind with wands or spells, but the kind that made a room feel welcoming. She stacked the pillow on a chair, then reached for another, repeating the process with the same quiet focus. The repetition was comforting, like a song you've heard 100 times but never tire of. It reminded her of her mother, who taught her to fluff pillows with care, saying, "A good pillow holds your dreams." Clara didn't know it, but her routines were more than just tasks. They were her way of finding peace in a world that expected her to be dazzling. Folding blankets, fluffing pillows, testing mattresses, these were her rebellion, her way of saying she was enough, just as she was. The kingdom might dream of a princess who danced at balls, but Clara dreamed of a perfect mattress and a cup of Elsie's tea. The castle settled into its morning rhythm, the fog outside wrapping it in a soft embrace. Clara's pillows were fluffed, Elsie's tea was poured, and Amos's roses stood quietly. The air was warm with the promise of another ordinary day, where nothing remarkable needed to happen. In Dormira, simplicity was its own kind of magic, a magic woven into every folded blanket, every steaming cup, every clipped thorn, a magic that whispered of resilience, of finding joy in the familiar, of knowing that the quiet moments were enough. If you're still tucked into your cozy nook with a blanket pulled close or a pillow cradling your head, you're right where you need to be. Take a slow, deep breath, letting the air fill your chest like a gentle mist swirling through Dormira's quiet valley. Hold it for a moment, then exhale softly, as if you're blowing out a candle across the room. Picture the air moving through you, calm and unhurried, like the steady rhythm of a kingdom where nothing grand ever happens. There's no rush here. Everything unfolds at the pace of a sleepy morning, and you're invited to drift along. The morning was deepening in Dormira, the fog outside still thick, but softened by a faint grayish light that filtered through the castle's fogged windows. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the floral warmth of Elsie's chamomile tea, the earthy dampness of Amos's garden, and the faint lavender from Clara's bedding chamber. The castle a cozy manor with creaky floors and soft linens hummed with quiet contentment, its residents moving through their routines like notes in a gentle lullaby. Princess Clara had finished fluffing pillows in the bedding chamber and was now seated at a small wooden desk by a window, preparing to write her daily letter. The desk was worn smooth from years of use, its surface holding a single candle, number 13, burning evenly, that cast a soft glow on her notebook. Clara's letter writing was a ritual as familiar as folding blankets or testing mattresses, a task so comforting it felt like slipping into a favorite sweater. She didn't write to anyone in particular. Her letters were addressed to nobody, a way to capture her thoughts without the pressure of an audience. She dipped her quill into a small ink pot, the ink a deep blue that reminded her of the sky on rare Vogels's evenings. She began, "Dear nobody, the fog is heavy today, like a curtain drawn across the world." Her handwriting was neat but unhurried, each word a small act of care. Writing letters was soothing, a way to anchor herself in a kingdom that sometimes expected her to be more regal, more adventurous, more like the princesses in tales of dragons and curses. But Clara preferred the quiet, the familiar, the simple act of putting pen to paper. She wrote about the mattresses she'd tested 7 so far, none quite perfect, and the pillow she'd fluffed, which was almost too soft. "Small things matter," she wrote, "even if nobody else notices." Clara didn't know it, but her letters were more than musings. They were a quiet rebellion, a way to claim her life as enough, just as it was. The repetition of writing, day after day, was like the rhythm of her breathing, familiar and grounding, a reminder that joy could be found in the ordinary. She paused to glance at the fog outside, which pressed against the window like a soft blanket. The fog was her companion, always there, always the same, wrapping the world in a hush that made her feel safe. She wrote, "The fog hides everything far away, but I don't mind. I like what's close." She blotted the page, careful not to smudge the ink, and set the letter aside to dry. Later, she'd tuck it into a box under her bed, where dozens of other letters rested, each one a small piece of her quiet days. In the garden, Amos was tending his compost pile, a small heap of thorns, petals, and vegetable peels that he treated like a work of art. The fog was so thick he could barely see the rose bushes, but Amos knew his garden by heart. He knelt beside the pile, adding a thorn and a petal from his basket, then turned the compost with a small trowel. "Balance," he muttered, a word he'd picked up from an old gardening book he'd found in the castle's library. He wasn't sure what it meant exactly, but it felt right, like the rhythm of clipping thorns or watering roses. Amos's routines were simple: check the roses, clip a thorn, turn the compost, but they were his anchor, as familiar as Clara's letters or Elsie's tea. He liked the repetition, the way each task flowed into the next, like a song he'd known forever. The garden didn't ask for grand gestures, only steady care, and Amos was happy to give it. He patted the compost pile, satisfied with its progress, and stood up, brushing the dirt from his knees. "You're fine," he told the roses, though they didn't need reassuring. Back in the kitchen, Elsie was checking her chamomile tea, which was nearly ready. The pot steamed gently, filling the room with a floral warmth that made the fog outside feel even cozier. She stirred the tea with a wooden spoon, her movements slow and deliberate, like a painter adding the final touch to a canvas. "Just a bit longer," she said to the teapot, as if it might agree. Elsie's tea-making was a ritual, as comforting as Clara's letter-writing or Amos's gardening, a task that wrapped her in familiarity like a warm shawl. The castle settled into its morning rhythm, the fog outside wrapping it in a gentle hush. Clara's letters rested on her desk, Amos's compost pile grew, and Elsie's tea steeped slowly. The kingdom of Dormira carried on, its simplicity a kind of magic, woven into every written word, every turned pile, every steaming pot of magic that whispered of resilience, of finding joy in the familiar, of knowing that the quiet moments were enough. The morning was settling into a comfortable rhythm in Dormira. The fog outside still thick, but softened by a faint grayish light that filtered through the castle's misty windows. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the floral warmth of Elsie's chamomile tea, the earthy dampness of Amos's garden, and the faint lavender from Clara's bedding chamber. The castle, a cozy manor with creaky floors and soft linens, hummed with quiet contentment, its residents moving through their routines like threads in a familiar tapestry. Princess Clara was still at her small wooden desk in the bedding chamber, her letter to nobody half finished. The candle, number 13, burning evenly, cast a soft glow on the page, making the blue ink shimmer faintly. She dipped her quill into the inkpot, pausing to consider her next words. Writing letters was more than a task for Clara, it was a sanctuary, a place where she could be herself without the kingdom's expectations weighing her down. She wrote, "The pillows today were soft, but not too soft. I think I'm getting closer to the perfect stack." Her words were simple, almost mundane, but they held a quiet power. Each sentence was a small act of defiance against the idea that a princess should be dazzling or heroic. Clara's heroism was in the ordinary, in the way she noticed the texture of a pillow or the weight of the fog. She wrote, "I folded a blanket earlier, wool a little frayed." It felt like folding a piece of the day. She didn't know it, but her letters were a kind of poetry, capturing the beauty of a life lived in small, familiar moments. She blotted the page, careful not to smudge the ink, and added the letter to a small pile on the desk. Later, she'd tuck it into the box under her bed, where it would join dozens of others, each one a record of her quiet days. The act of writing was comforting, like the repetition of folding blankets or testing mattresses. It was familiar, predictable, a routine that wrapped around her like a warm scarf. Clara glanced at the fog outside, which pressed against the window like a soft embrace, and smiled. The fog was her friend, always there, always the same. Downstairs in the kitchen, Elsie was baking a fresh batch of biscuits. The chamomile tea was ready, cooling in its pot, and now the kitchen smelled of flour and butter, a warm, comforting scent that made the fog outside feel even cozier. Elsie stood at the counter, her apron dusted with flour, kneading dough with slow, steady movements. She didn't measure the ingredients too fussy, but trusted her hands to know the right amount of flour, butter, and milk. Biscuits don't need to be fancy. she muttered, shaping the dough into small, round mounds. Baking biscuits was Elsie's ritual, as familiar as Clara's letter writing or Amos's thorn clipping. She liked the simplicity of it, the way a few ingredients could become something warm and satisfying. She placed the biscuits on a tray, sliding it into the oven with a soft clunk. The oven was old, with a door that creaked, but Elsie didn't mind. Imperfections were part of the kitchen's charm, like the chipped tray or the slightly uneven counter. She set out a clean cloth to cool the biscuits, humming a tuneless hum that seemed to belong to the castle itself. In the garden, Amos was checking his compost pile, adding a petal and a thorn from his morning rounds. The fog was so thick he could barely see the rose bushes, but Amos didn't need to see them to know they were fine. He turned the pile with his trowel, fluffing it gently to keep the balance just right. "You're doing well," he told the pile, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the compost or himself. The repetition of turning the pile, clipping thorns, and checking roses was soothing, like a song he'd known all his life. It wasn't exciting, but it was enough. Back in the bedding chamber, Clara had finished her letter and was now arranging her desk. She lined up the inkpot, quill, and notebook with care, each item in its proper place. The act was small, almost insignificant, but it gave her a sense of control, a way to anchor herself in a world that sometimes asked for more than she could give. She didn't know it, but her routines, writing letters, folding blankets, fluffing pillows, were more than just chores. They were her way of finding strength, of proving that a quiet life could be as meaningful as any fairy tale adventure. She glanced at the mattress she'd tested earlier, wondering if it might be worth another try. "Maybe tomorrow," she said to herself, her voice soft in the quiet room. She blew out the candle, number 13, now a stub, and headed downstairs, drawn by the scent of Elsie's biscuits. The fog outside pressed closer, wrapping the castle in its gentle hush. Clara's letters rested on the desk, Elsie's biscuits baked slowly, and Amos's compost pile grew. The kingdom of Dormira carried on, its simplicity a kind of magic woven into every folded blanket, every kneaded dough, every turned pile a magic that whispered of resilience, of finding joy in the familiar, of knowing that the quiet moments were enough. If you're still nestled in your cozy nook, with a blanket pulled close or a pillow cradling your head, you're right where you need to be. Take a slow, deep breath, letting the air fill your chest like a gentle mist swirling through Dormira's quiet valley. Hold it for a moment, then exhale softly, as if you're blowing out a candle across the room. Picture the air moving through you, calm and unhurried, like the steady rhythm of a kingdom where nothing grand ever happens. There's no rush here. Everything unfolds at the pace of a sleepy morning, and you're invited to drift along. The morning was settling into a gentle rhythm in Dormira, the fog outside thick and soft, wrapping the castle in a gray embrace. The air was cool, carrying the floral warmth of Elsie's chamomile tea, the earthy scent of Amos's compost pile, and the faint lavender from Clara's bedding chamber. The castle a cozy manor with creaky floors and stacks of linens, hummed with quiet contentment, its residents moving through their routines like ripples in a still pond. Princess Clara had finished her letter to nobody and was back in the bedding chamber, surrounded by mattresses and pillows that seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight, number 14, burning steadily. She was testing mattresses again, a task that sounded whimsical but was, in truth, wonderfully ordinary. Clara didn't test for hidden peas. As the old tale might suggest, she tested for comfort, for the kind of mattress that cradled you like a warm hug. She pressed her hand against a new mattress, stuffed with goose feathers, feeling for lumps or sags. "Too fluffy?" she murmured, jotting in her notebook. "Mattress 8. Feathers too soft." She moved to the next, a firmer one made of wool, and sat on it gently, bouncing just enough to test its give. "Better," she said, though she wasn't convinced. Clara's system was simple: press, sit, bounce, note. She tested 8 mattresses today, each one a step closer to perfection, but not quite there. The kingdom thought her mattress testing was odd, a quirk unfit for a princess who should be hosting feasts or charming suitors, but Clara didn't care. A good mattress was a small rebellion, a way to claim comfort in a world that demanded more than she wanted to give. Testing mattresses was more than a chore, it was a meditation, a routine so familiar it felt like breathing. Each press of her hand, each gentle bounce, was a moment of quiet focus, a reminder that small things can matter deeply. Clara didn't know it, but her mattress testing held a hidden depth. It was her way of seeking balance, of proving she could find peace without the grandeur the kingdom expected. The repetition was soothing, like the fog that never lifted, wrapping her in a familiar embrace. In the courtyard, a new figure appeared through the fog. Nora, the letter carrier. Nora was a sturdy woman with a worn satchel and a scarf that was always slightly askew. She came to Dormira once a week, delivering letters that were mostly bills or invitations to events Clara never attended. Today, her satchel was light, holding only a single letter for Elsie from a cousin in a neighboring village. Nora's routine was as predictable as Clara's mattress testing. Walk the foggy path, knock on the castle door, hand over the letters, and share a biscuit with Elsie before leaving. Nora knocked on the door, her knuckles rapping softly against the wood. Elsie answered, her apron still dusted with flour, and handed Nora a warm biscuit. "Quiet day," Nora said, taking a bite. Elsie nodded, pouring a cup of chamomile tea for her. "Always is," she replied. Nora's visits were brief but comforting, a small ritual that tied Dormira to the world beyond the fog. She didn't carry grand proclamations or urgent news, just ordinary letters, the kind that reminded everyone life was steady and simple. In the garden, Amos was checking his rose bushes, clipping a thorn and adding it to his compost basket. The fog was so thick he could barely see the path, but Amos didn't mind. He liked the quiet, the way the fog muffled the world and made his tasks feel private. He turned the compost pile with his trowel, fluffing it gently. "You're coming along," he said, patting the pile like an old friend. The repetition of clipping, turning, and checking was his anchor, as familiar as Clara's letters or Elsie's biscuits. It wasn't exciting, but it was enough. Back in the bedding chamber, Clara was fluffing a pillow to place on the wool mattress, testing the combination. She shook the pillow gently, watching it puff up, and set it down with care. The act was small, almost insignificant, but it carried a quiet weight. Fluffing pillows, like writing letters or testing mattresses, was her way of creating order, of finding beauty in the mundane. She wrote in her notebook, "Pillow fluffed, paired with mattress 8, needs retest." The note was unnecessary, but it felt right, a record of her morning's small triumphs. Downstairs, Elsie was tidying the kitchen, wiping the counter with a cloth that had seen better days. The biscuits were cooling, the tea was poured, and the air was warm with the promise of another ordinary day. She glanced at Nora, who was finishing her biscuit, and smiled. "See you next week," Elsie said, as Nora adjusted her scarf and stepped back into the fog. The castle hummed along, its residents wrapped in their quiet tasks. Clara's mattresses waited patiently, Nora's satchel swung lightly. Amos's compost pile grew. Elsie's tea cooled slowly, and the fog outside pressed closer. Dormira carried on, its simplicity a kind of magic, woven into every pressed mattress. Every delivered letter, every clipped thorn, a magic that whispered of resilience, of finding joy in the familiar, of knowing that the quiet moments held depths as vast as any fairy tale adventure. The morning was deepening in Dormira, the fog outside thick and soft, wrapping the castle in a gray hush. The air was cool, carrying the floral warmth of Elsie's chamomile tea, the earthy scent of Amos's compost pile, and the faint lavender from Clara's bedding chamber. The castle a cozy manor with creaky floors and stacks of linens, hummed with quiet contentment, its residents moving through their routines like ripples in a still pond. Princess Clara was back in the bedding chamber, having finished her mattress testing for the morning. She stood before a stack of blankets, ready to begin her folding routine, a task as soothing as writing letters or fluffing pillows. The candle, number 14, still burning steadily, cast a soft glow on the linens, making the wool and cotton glow faintly, like a pile of clouds. Clara picked up a woolen blanket, its edges slightly frayed from years of use, and smoothed it with her hands. "Nice and even," she murmured, folding it into a neat square with slow, deliberate movements. Folding blankets was more than a chore for Clara, it was a meditation, a ritual that wrapped her in familiarity like the fog outside. Each fold was a small act of care, a way to create order in a kingdom that sometimes expected her to be more than she was. She didn't dream of balls or princes, as the old fairy tales might suggest. She dreamed of a perfectly folded blanket, its edges aligned, its weight just right. Clara didn't know it,